Hello everyone and welcome back. I noticed that the camera actually is getting quite a bit darker lately. I'm not sure if that's just the lighting in this room or the time of year, but I suppose it doesn't really matter. Or maybe actually, just a sec. Oops. Does that improve things a little bit? Maybe. So welcome back everyone. So today's stream I'm a bit excited about. So uh, last week's stream I was mainly working through the project where I translate kind of an external script from using shell script to use Laurel. I'll be taking a brief pause on that today to actually work on something that I should have been working on a long time ago. I thought it'd be very complicated, but I was able to get some time in between streams to take a further look at it. So I've gotten a bit more bearings on it now, which is actually updating the scanner of this project. So this is something that, so in this project so far, I've been using LALRPOP to generate the parser for the language that I'm developing, and it's pretty nice. It takes a lot of the boilerplate out of what would be creating more or less the same abstractions by hand. So if I was building up these statements using a custom defined parser, it'd be more or less doing the same thing except with a bit more boilerplate. The one thing that I've had issue with for a while though is the fact that if I call it the scanner component for this, or the Lexer, for LALRPOP is also auto-generated, but it's kind of a default one, and the rules that you can kind of embed in it are a bit more. I suppose I found it kind of difficult to write rules that capture the way I want the scanner to work. The way I wanted the scanner to work, I wasn't able to define it so accurately using what I knew of the scanner manipulation in LALRPOP. So I took a bit of time to look at how to actually write, because it's kind of an all or nothing thing as well. You either use the manual or you use the default scanner and kind of adapt to its quirks, or you have to replace all of it by hand. And there's no kind of in between. You can't kind of use most of the default scanner to say handle whitespace and things like that. You either have to use the default one or not. So that was kind of putting me off for a while, but after taking a look, there are a few kind of moving parts, a few pieces to get all of this working together. It did take me a little bit of time to get it all the pieces speaking to each other and working together. So hopefully now I'll be recreating that process in this stream, and hopefully by the end be able to handle some of the things that I was having issues with in this language previously. So things like actually identifying, especially in the case of parse errors, the proper line and column that the token error arose in. Things like handling comments properly so that it doesn't the comment actually ends at the end of the line and doesn't continue on to the end of the file. Maybe taking a look at matching strings properly, and lots of bits and pieces like that. I'm not sure how much I'll be able to get done in this kind of time slot, but we're going to give it a stab anyway. And so I suppose that's the idea here. It'll be kind of quite different to the other streams because I suppose to some extent I'll have to undo, or not necessarily undo, but I suppose ignore a lot of the actual functionality of the parser that's been built up so far, because this is kind of one of the foundational elements that needs to be put in. So I'll actually be disabling a lot of these rules while I build up the scanner as well. So we'll really be kind of starting from ground zero to a certain extent. But yeah, I'm pretty excited to finally get stuck into this and get this working. And what I have said in a previous stream, that the scanner isn't really something that I spend too much time on in these kind of projects. I feel it's a bit more of an implementation detail that you kind of forget about. Oh, for some reason the internet. Okay, for some reason the internet was getting a bit patchy there. But I do feel the scanner is one of these pieces that you do kind of sort out at the start and then just kind of forget about, whereas the parser is always kind of a relevant detail, I feel, when developing features. But having said that, it's still it's still something that is important to get right, hopefully, and can influence the project in a big way. So yeah, so I'm going to basically just jump in. My first task will be to get the custom Lexer in place and get the project compiling again using the custom Lexer instead of the default LALRPOP Lexer. So there'll be a little bit of work going into that, but hopefully it'll be something that I'll be able to do without too much difficulty. One thing I realized as well is I've been developing in the LALRPOP file in Vim without any styling, and I realized recently that I could, again, looking at the LALRPOP documentation, it makes sense to set the syntax in Vim to just Rust, and it annotates the LALRPOP file fairly well as well. In fact, if I jump to another file and then come back to that one, oh, it doesn't keep the. Actually, what I'll do in that case is I'll just take a quick detour and set up some styling rules for LALRPOP files. So if I say so if a file ends with LALRPOP, then it'll set the local syntax to be Rust. So let's try that. And if I open, no, that didn't seem to. Oh, maybe I have to actually refresh Vim so that the config file reloads. Yeah, and so we have syntax highlighting. So that hopefully will make things slightly easier to read as well. And so first bit that I'll do in this case is, let's see, so there are a few moving parts here, I think, to get this working. As you can see, I have a little crib sheet here that I have open separately. I'll be trying to more or less recreate the Lexer that I developed. Again, I haven't it fully fleshed out, so there is still a bit to do, but I'll be developing the Lexer in lexer.rs. So the first thing to do is to just copy the copyright stuff so that people are able to copy this easily enough, because it'll be MIT licensed. So with that, there are a couple of pieces, and again, I'm more or less following on from, if I copy the URL from a separate screen I have. So I'm basically following on the LALRPOP tutorial for writing a custom Lexer. And there are a couple of bits to this, like I mentioned. There's this concept of a spanned type that we'll be introducing, but two of the main pieces will be tokens and the types of errors, though I won't be introducing probably errors for a little bit at the moment. We'll be introducing the Lexer type itself, and there'll be an iterator implementation over that. There will also be a custom location type. So LALRPOP, as we might have seen before, just uses a usize as the location type, which means where in the tokens it basically doesn't account for lines in the token stream or in the source stream, so that it basically just says at what character in the unit one direction or one dimensional stream where did the error occur, whereas we're going to take new lines into account here and use those to try and give more accurate error locations. So let's go ahead and start implementing a bunch of those. So the first thing to do is implement a token. Maybe I will call it TOK just to our toke. Not sure how to pronounce that, but yeah, maybe I'll just call it token to make it easier to reference. And the first token I'll be implementing, just because of its simplicity, is null. And that will have an effect on this, like I mentioned with this LALRPOP file. This depends on the scanner producing all of these different types of tokens, and when I'm writing the custom one, those tokens won't be available anymore. Therefore, what I'll have to do is disable a lot of those. And what I'll need from this as well, so this is just pieces that I know need to be there from playing around with this, but the tokens will need to be clonable and debuggable. I'll be introducing the lexical errors, and that will need to be debuggable as well. So that at the moment we won't have any lexical errors, but they'll be introduced later. I will have the Lexer itself, and then where to go from here. I will also implement iterator for Lexer, and in that case, and what I'll do as well is I'll implement the constructor for Lexer too. So that'll be public function new. At the moment, it takes a character stream as a string. In fact, I'll just leave that empty for the moment, and we'll add the actual stream in a second. It'll return a new Lexer, and the iterator will generate will iterate over items of this type. So this spanner type is, or sorry, spanned type, not spanner. Where is that defined in my oh yeah, sorry. So this is copied more or less from this source file. So we have this spanned type, and what that's essentially saying is each iteration over the Lexer will essentially return a stream of tokens, and each token will be returned with so it won't be the token on its own, it'll be this spanned item. So it captures a couple of details, and it essentially boils down into this. So maybe we won't. So spanned is kind of a useful shorthand for this, but this is really what's going on. And it's essentially saying that each token that gets returned, if there's no error. So first of all, each item returned from the iterator could be an error, or it could be a valid token. And then if it is a valid token, it'll have a location on the left and the right, with the location on the left being where that token starts in the stream, in the input stream, and the location on the right will be where the end of that token span, I suppose, in the token, in the input stream as well. So the spanned in our case is going to be the token that we defined above. The location, for now, I'll just use usize as well. And the error here will be the Lex error. So let's keep moving on. So then next, it mutates the input stream that's kind of bound to the Lexer, so that'll need to be mutable, though it doesn't need to be for now. But and the last note about this is, even though this the span itself can be a token or an error, once we reach that's only in the case that there is something to be parsed from the stream itself. So if we reach the end of the stream, we'll actually return none. Otherwise, the span itself will be returned in OK. So again, few different pieces here, few concepts and moving parts, but hopefully that makes sense. And what I'm going to do for the start is, will we return none, just to get the concept working, and I'll build that. And what I'll do as well is I'll restart my dev loop, because I created this new Lexer file. It's not being, say, listened to for this dev loop. So I have the dev loop running in such a way that whenever I modify a file, okay, I'm not quite sure what was happening there. I feel like I had internet connection, but the stream seemed to be having trouble. Not sure, but where was I? So yeah, so this is a new file. It wasn't being listened to, so I just restarted the listeners, so that now if I make a modification to lexer.rs, that'll be reflected, and we'll rebuild the project over here. So now that I have the Lexer module developed, I think that there are probably two main bits, no, maybe three, to get this all working together and get the project using this this new Lexer. And the main thing that we'll probably note over here is that, well, there'll be a couple of things to note. I'll also need to modify the source file, because again, if I don't support all of these tokens that are defined in docker get.laravel, if if those tokens aren't defined, then they can't be parsed and evaluated either. So I'll need to comment out a lot of this too. So first things first, what I'll do is, I'll go into the main parser LALRPOP file, and go use Lexer. And well, no, I'll probably extract the actual pieces, the moving pieces that I want out of this. And the pieces that I want are well, I don't need the location yet because I haven't a custom type for that just yet, but I'll have lex error, and I will have the lex token, and that's more or less it. So I'll be grabbing those. I'll comment out the match for the moment. And the way in LALRPOP that we then link it to an externally defined Lexer is to define this extern block. And we'll say the location type is defined for the moment as usize. The error type is lexerror. And finally, we'll have, this is a bit of a weird one. I kind of get what's going on here, but there's this mapping from kind of terminal symbols to two tokens. I'll go into that in just a bit, but this should hopefully be enough to start building. So one thing to note here is I haven't any terminal symbols defined in here, or I think it's just, maybe they're just called terminals, not terminal symbols. So I don't have any terminals defined in here, so it's saying straight away. So if I go to the top of this file, to one of the first productions, it's saying that first production encountered contains a terminal that doesn't actually have any patterns defined for it in the external scanner. So what I'm going to need to do for the moment is basically comment out all of the productions I have so far. And in fact, what I'll do, what's the best way to, yeah, well, this probably isn't going to 46. Unresolved import Lexer token. That's public. Oh, because I haven't actually defined the module in the root of the project. I still find that a little tricky. The fact that those things have to be defined like that. And so the next, I think this will probably be one of the last bits to hook everything together, and that is, so previously I was using this, again, program parser that was auto-generated, and it took a raw string and just parsed that directly. Now that a custom Lexer is being developed, I actually need to instead instantiate that Lexer. So if I import that, and what I need to do here is, yeah, instantiate it. So we'll go Lexer new, and I don't take any parameters for it at the moment. That's where, ampersand test will go once I implement that. But then instead of taking the string argument, the raw string argument, I'll take the Lexer instead, and the Lexer will provide that iterator interface. So what's going wrong here now? So we have all these unused things from the AST, which is to be expected, or they're not unused, they're never constructed. That's actually very very interesting warning to raise. But yeah, so I'm not sure about this. So an arithmetic operation will overflow. So there's probably some error that I'm introducing with the fact that I don't really have any content in the scanner just yet. So it's basically been a minimal implementation just to get everything hooked up. But it does kind of look like things are hooked up at the moment. Is there anything else I could do? Yeah, I suppose the next step maybe is I've defined this null token. I don't necessarily have to return it just yet, but I can actually set up the handling for it. So if I take a look at Parser LALRPOP again, I can say that, okay, if I get a null terminal for the moment, and I have all the AST productions or all the AST nodes already developed, so there's no need to redefine all of these things. For the most part, I can kind of work around my already established rules somewhat, but still get the same functionality working. So what I'll do to get some bits working is, first of all, I'll set up or I'll simplify the statement rule just to kind of skip some recursiveness and just get the proof of concept working. So it's basically saying when it reads this terminal, so a program will consist of any number of statements that will be collected into the program body, and each statement can just be the terminal null. So that's basically, each program will just consist of the word null any number of times, and each of those will then result in a statement node that contains a single null expression. So if I build that, I'll get the same error as earlier, which is that terminal isn't yet supported. So we'll add support for it down here. Oops. And we want to go token null. Again, I kind of get why this is needed. I somewhat think that it could be handier to put the kind of token name in there instead of the terminal kind of description, just because, well, this actually looks and reads a lot nicer for the most part. The only part that I think it could be a little confusing is later when I'm hoping to use Go-like scanner abstraction to be able to automatically inject semicolons. So, the LALRPOP source will contain semicolons, even though that'll be, in theory, automatically generated by the scanner. So even though this is what the parser will be parsing, it's not what the source file will actually contain. I might get into that in a bit more detail later. It's probably a bit abstract now, but that's just kind of going into setting up this mapping down here. But anyway, so far so good. The project is now compiling and it's outputting. Basically, just it's saying, okay, so the file got parsed, nothing actually got done. There is no result because first of all, so the scanner at the moment is just straight away returning an EOF, end of file or end of stream token. So there's nothing to be parsed. So I suppose the next thing to start getting working is to actually start properly scanning some source code. So the way I'll do that, so the approach recommended in here has a couple of different levels coming on, and it kind of tracks lifetimes a bit. It uses character indices. I'm still so it essentially wraps around an input stream and makes it such that it carries the index information with the stream. I'm still playing around with a few ideas around this. I think I can use peekable interface or trait to add support for look ahead. The only thing about the indexing approach is that that's actually not so useful or relevant, I feel, to my situation, which is to also track line numbers, which I think will be very important. So I probably won't use I'm not sure if it's necessarily the recommended or suggested approach, but shall we say the approach used in the tutorial. I'll probably be going with a more low level approach. So first thing to do is to actually add in the input stream. So the constructor now will take, let's see, characters input, and we'll add an explicit lifetime because this is going to be captured by the Lexer itself. So the Lexer implementation and definition will need these bits. So I think implementation input, Lexer input, and here we go characters. We'll just take it as is, and let's see, that will be of type, that'll be an input string. Now, do I need anything else? No, that should be it just to get things working, and this implementation also will need input for Lexer, input. Do any of these need more information? I don't think so. And I'll also need to update main to actually take that that ampersand test variable from earlier. So, and I need to actually compile this Lexer file. Cool. So now that's being passed in correctly, but nothing's actually being done with it. So the next step is to actually start parsing the input stream and acting on the input. So let me think. So this is where I'm kind of coming to the end of my notes. I'm coming into more off the cuff coding. So I'll be probably taking a few more breaks from now on just to think about things. But I think one of the first things I want to do here is there are a couple of different approaches. Sometimes I actually split out a special look ahead stream and split it out from the iterator itself. I'll probably, in this scenario though, keep it within the iterator implementation. Yeah, I probably don't need to put it in the Lexer itself. I can play around with different ideas, I suppose. I don't have to marry myself into any particular implementation for now. But what peek will do will essentially return the next character, probably a reference to a character, though it's probably as easy for the likes of a character to copy it. I assume it's easier to copy a character in Rust than to actually than to use references at that point. But then that would possibly make sense in the case of UT or of ASCII. But come to think of it, Rust is UTF-8 for strings by default. So maybe references actually is the appropriate approach here. So what I want to do is I want to be able to peek at the next character in the stream so that I can see what's coming up ahead without actually consuming it from the stream. And the thing to note about consuming characters from the stream as well is that I'll need to actually track, I say consuming, but behind the scenes, I'll just be implementing this as a regular, index-based iteration over the character stream or over the input stream. So I'll be maintaining an index here. The index will be 0 to start off with, and peek will essentially be an operation that doesn't modify, that will return the character under the index, but without actually modifying the index. So I probably don't need to make that a mutable reference either. So peek, I think we're good to probably just perform characters index, and I can probably, let's see if I can do it like that. So so it's not a member of that trait, therefore I can't define it on it. So maybe I can define it there and call it from next instead. So let's see, line 25, that'll be on self, and input will be on self as well. Index. And string indices are ranges of usize, so it can't be index. So the type string can't be index of usize. So maybe there's a special method to return Rust char at. Okay, maybe there's a potential issue here, or maybe that's kind of one of the reasons why character indices might be appropriate actually, because because we are dealing with UTF-8, so it's not as simple as just looking up at a particular array position. Yeah. So maybe that's not the right approach, and maybe I should actually stick with the character indices. So yeah, let's go ahead and grab that. And so characters in this case is going to be it's going to be char indices. Oh, but I don't necessarily need the indexes, I don't think, because I'll be maintaining my own pair to maintain the location where I am. So what I'll do is standard string chars instead, and this will be constructed by doing, let's see, characters chars. So let's try that. And yeah, can't index into that, but what I could potentially do is, again, I believe I can construct a peekable here, and that's defined on iter, and we'll do it like this. So let's try that, and that'll mean that I will no longer be referencing it like this, and instead I'll probably be doing something like that. And it's an option, oh yes, because it could be the end of the stream. So let's try that. Cannot infer an appropriate lifetime. So that's one thing I didn't look into, is what does peekable actually return. So let's look up that trait, and it returns a reference to an ISIterator item. Oops. And so maybe I can just do it like that. That needs a mutable reference. And we're compiling again. So yeah, so that's good. So the next bit I need to do is, so as I work through this, the main thing that I'll be setting up in the scanner is mostly the rules that are defined at the end of the LALRPOP file. So most of these, definitions like import, let, all of these kind of things will be more or less matches on simpler Lexer rules. The main things that I'll be looking at is developing developing the generation of these kind of tokens. So tokens for identifiers, token for string literals, for quoted and unquoted string literals, for integers, and so on and so forth. So with that in mind, I'll be setting up, there's a couple of layers to this, but it really is mostly on the basis of peeking ahead and having kind of not having an overlap or disambiguating the start of these matches. So, for example, one thing that people might notice when they're getting into programming is an early limitation of when you're defining identifiers is that an identifier can't start with a number. It has to start with an alphanumeric, or it has to start with an alphabetic character or an underscore or something like that, and then it can be that then it can contain numbers. And I suppose a simple reason for that, now I'm not sure if this is the universal reason, but one advantage of this is that it makes disambiguating an identifier from an integer very easy by just looking at the first character. So if I'm at the start of a file and I look ahead to the first non-whitespace character, I know that if I look at the first character, if it's a number, then I know that's the start of an integer. Whereas if it's an alphabetic character, I know it's the start of an identifier. And disambiguating based on the first character is very useful. So, and that's where peak comes into importance as well, because that's used to figure out what direction the part or the character scanning, I suppose, should go in based on the first item. Now, before I get into that, actually, a useful thing to set up right at the start is a mechanism for skipping whitespace. So maybe I'll set that up now, actually. And the function here will so let's see, skip whitespace, and that won't actually return anything, but all it'll do is essentially keep moving through the stream, and as long as the next character is a whitespace character, then it consumes it. So let's see. So this will be something like while self peak so first of all, while there's something there, it'll keep consuming, and it'll check the character as well. So now I probably won't be able to match on C directly, will I? I'll probably have to dereference it because it's borrowed, and that dereferencing itself copies the character. There's probably no good way around that, is there? I'm not sure. Like I could, in the match statements, reference the thing that's being matched against it. I'm not sure does that actually make sense to do, but I suppose I'll take the usual approach of get it working first and then worry about making it pretty or what have you. So let's see. I'll probably have this as a simple enough. Let's see. We have an is whitespace function, although the overhead of a function call for something like this is probably more than is necessary. So what we're going to say, if the character that we're on is, well, actually, isn't there, probably makes more sense. Again, I'm more used to writing in the likes of, I know when I've been writing parsers and scanners and things, it's usually traditionally has been in non-UTF-8 languages or ASCII-based languages such as C. So I'll just look up. Yeah, so that's defined in Unicode. So maybe if the next character isn't white space, then we stop. Then we start that parsing. So instead of break, maybe it makes more sense to return. Okay, so we skip all of white space, and so basically whenever we attempt to retrieve the next token, we just skip all white space and arrive at the start of the next, I suppose, the next non-white space character to be parsed. And so what we'll do is, let's try this. So we don't, maybe it'd be an opportunity to introduce some lexical errors as well. So what we'll do is, if self peak is equal to, let's see, I can probably, again, this is kind of possibly a double-edged sword here in the sense of, like, we're really getting into potentially micro optimizations, but considering that this really is going to be a hotspot or a hot loop in terms of the parsing, we could be potentially, the overhead of function calls could be that something that makes a difference in big programs, but maybe I won't worry about that too much. But something that could make things easier is to use these built-in functions for considering whether something's a digit or not. Oh, sorry. So if that's a digit of a certain base, so these are all numeric. So maybe I don't want that, and maybe I want to actually, is ASCII digit. So basically, of these, 0 is the only digit. Oh, and maybe I'll, just keep things simple for now. Maybe I'll say is ASCII white space. So I'll keep it as a kind of an ASCII language, ASCII based language for the moment, and then I can take a look at making it a bit more I suppose flexible. But let's see, ASCII digit in this case I think makes the most sense. So is ASCII So for the moment, I'm going to say what's it called? Just numbers aren't supported. So this will be just an unsupported error for the moment. That will need to be in an OK. Or no, sorry, that will need to be in a sum. And so we have also lowercase or uppercase. could use is alphanumeric. Oh no, sorry, alphabetic. So that's upper or lowercase. And here's where we're going to start parsing. And then finally we'll say otherwise unsupported, basically. Well, we also want to handle the case where, so this is an option itself, actually. So let's see. So we'll go if so what we're going to actually do is, first of all, we're going to handle the case where after we've skipped the white space that we're actually at the end of the file. So in that case, what we're going to say is if there is something there, then we'll set it to it. We'll set C to that character. Otherwise, we'll return none because we're at the end of the file. And then down here, we will do what? Yeah, for the moment, I'll just say return some. Let's see, so it'll have to be a result of this form. So it'll be some OK, and it'll be a location followed by a token followed by a location. So in this case, it'll be so the location in this case is just going to be the U size. So I'm not properly incrementing the U size just yet, but this is what it might look like in a while. Now, I'm not actually parsing null or scanning null just yet, so this is a bit cheeky, but this is what will be going in here at some point. So let's see, line 57, giving back the wrong type, so expected a result. Yeah, so I need to actually wrap that in an error, and same for down here. All right, and so now the only thing about this is that nothing is now being output. So what's the reason for that? Not fully sure. What I'll do for the moment though is I'll back up. So this is the file that's getting compiled basically. I'll remove everything, and okay, so that's parsing that. Let's see, if I put in a digit there, it's going to fail with an unsupported error. If I put in a character here though, what's happening there? So it's it's doing yes, it's performing an infinite loop. Yeah, the usual one. And yeah, because what's happening is I'm not actually continuing, like I keep returning the same null token. So this iterator keeps asking for another token. I keep returning the null token without actually incrementing it or returning anything else. So and what the other case is if I don't have anything in the file, or if I have just white space in the file, for example, and the file doesn't contain anything, and Oh, why isn't so that's going to fail for some reason. I feel like that should consume the white space and then reach the end of the file, but that looks like it's getting going to be aborted in a second as well with a core dump, but not sure what's happening. But basically, now is the time to start looking. And in fact, I don't need to handle or handle digits just there. I can actually just look at alphabet is ASCII alphabetics instead. So what I'll do is I've now detected that this is the start of some sequence of characters. I know that when something starts with a character, that it should be parsed as an identifier, which is a sequence of starts with an alphabetic character, but is then followed by a number of alphanumeric characters or underscores. So I'll go ahead and do that. So let's see. While C is ASCII alpha numeric, is it? Yeah. And what's my best approach here? Well, no, it won't be while C is, it'll be while, and I'll need to grab the end index. So I have to be, my default kind of mode of operation from functional programming typically is to just build up new lists of things. But then, coming to Rust, where it does have such a focus on efficiency and ownership and things like that, it makes more sense in this case to, I know that basically deal with ranges and sub-ranges of this input list of characters. So what I'll do is I'll let the start equal the current index. That should get copied because it's a U size. And then I'll say let's see, while self peak is ASCII alphanumeric, I'll go self next. And then I'll get to the end, and the end will be the position I am after I parse all of this. So let's see. So now I have to define next. And in fact, maybe so I'm already going to be defining next. So maybe next char. And what I'll define as well is just to keep things consistent. I'll call that peak char. And the only difference here with peak really will be that I'll increment the index, and this will also be the point at which I'll introduce tracking of the current line number and things as well. So I'll be saying, okay, if the character that I've just consumed is a new line character, then increment that line number. So let's so I'll just get rid of that. That didn't actually core dump in the end, so might have still been running though. So peak char Oh, so that needs to stay as peak. Line 40. That returns the character itself because it's being popped. Well, okay, so it actually pops those characters off. That's interesting. That it's not still just a. I wonder if that's yeah, interesting. So no ASCII alphanumeric. So let's see. Is ASCII, is that in a new one? I just don't have it in my version of Rust. Oh, that's because peak char is an option. So let's see. Let's see. So while it is some, I assume I can't do an and in there, so I'll probably have to put this inside. But let's see, while there is some character going on in there, and it is alphanumeric, then I continue on. If and does that do what I want in all cases? So if I've reached the end of the stream, then it cuts it short, and I'm at the end, and I'll still handle the sub section of the stream all right. And if there is a character there and it's alphanumeric, then I continue on. So yeah, and I also want to do if C is equal to underscore. Now I wonder if that will require me to yeah, so that's a reference thing. I wonder, can I do that? And I wonder, will that introduce that reference every time as a new character? I assume the compiler will optimize that away, I would hope. But anyway, what I can do then is I can put start and end here. And now that I have the range, I can say self-chars start to end is, I can do a match on this. And first of all, let's see. I think I can do string matches like that. I don't think I want to copy that. Will that perform a copy? I'm not sure. I'll also need to handle the unsupported case. So let's go ahead and return an error in that case. And there we go, I think. Perfect. So help use a comma to end a match expression. Yep. And then 73 can't index into a value of. Yes. That's an interesting one. So maybe I do need to keep track of the underlying string, but maybe if I, let's see, Rust string. So if I only navigate it um, via UTF-8, are they called code points? So let's see. So there's get. Okay, so I can perform that. And how would I go on to the next character then? So let's see. So maybe I'll get rid of this peekable stuff again. And we'll go back to plain index of a string. But in this case, so we'll have and so if I do a get, yeah, it returns a reference. So if I perform a get, it'll do get self index. Let's try that first. Keep swapping those around. So string indices are ranges of usize. Okay, so I don't know the size of the next character. Can I do the next character boundary, or yeah, so how do I another option would be to yeah, can I do it, turn it into a vector of characters? Not sure. Oh, character indices, actually, that's, although no, that's an actual iterator, isn't it? So it returns the index paired with the UTF-8 character. So I want to be able to perform to get ranges, but also iterate one character at a time. So how can I perform my own character iteration? I basically need to be able to deduce what's the current character I'm on and I know what the start of the current character I'm on is, but I need to find out what the end of the current character I'm on is. And if I'm at the end of the stream, the start of the character will be the same as the end of the character. So let's see. What's my best bet if would I have to kind of manually loop and check each character to see if it's a character boundary? What's my easiest way of handling those character boundaries? could pair that with the underlying source, but I assume if I have an iterator over character indices that I can't reference the original word. Can I? Maybe I can. So if I went, if I were to try and access, let's see. If I were to try and access the word at character 3 to character 4, at that point, is that possible because I have an iterator going over it? Let's see. Yeah, so that actually works. So the iterator is somewhat separate and doesn't preclude me from accessing the underlying source. So maybe I can use the two in tandem. So I can use the peakable stream to find out where I am and what I need to do next, and then use the indices I get from that to get ranges of the original source. So maybe I'll undo the changes that I have, some of them, and I introduce, I'll just call it raw chairs for the moment. And so this is chair indices. And how do I get it again? Just chair indices method. So let's try that. Is that actually possible? So let's see. Yeah, there's that. And I need chair indices. So for this, I just need to convert it, and then down here I use the raw chairs, and expected a string like that. Yeah, so that might be a runner. Let me think then. So the thing that's going wrong here is that I need to match on that. I think. Yeah, just extract that piece out of the puzzle, and then more or less do the same here, I think. Except in this case, what I'll need to do is set the index to the index I that I get out here. And so that lets me know where the start of the newest character is. And where I am. So it does mean that, so that's a bit of a funny one. Because it means when I start the program, the index will be 0, and then after I consume the first character, I'll also be at the first character. And that'll need to be next as well. Yeah, I'll have to look at that a bit more. But let's see. Let's at least test this out. So I'll try NUL for null, and that's unsupported. But if I change it to null, I still get unsupported. So let's see. Called unwrap on an error value user. I'm not quite sure what user is indicating in that case, but I'll just do some print line debugging to see what's happening. So it's probably, or it could easily be to do with an off by one error introduced by the way I'm doing this. Yes, so checking null, and even though I'm at the end of the file, or precisely because I'm at the end of the file, that's being handled like that. Like if I added a space in there, that doesn't seem to be terminating, but yeah. Oh no, I shouldn't have. Oh yeah, so let's see. And why, if I perform skip whitespace, doesn't, in fact, I might just debug that first to see. So if I put in all white spaces and I do some print lines around here, and if I just do all white space, doesn't print out anything. It probably gets stuck in this skip whitespace loop, so does it? So at this point, I'm not actually consuming the white space. I'm just saying if it isn't white space, then I return. So otherwise, I need to consume the character. So let's try that. Put that in place again, and yeah, so we actually successfully exit in that case. So in the case of a file that just contains white space, we successfully return and skip the white space. And so if we contain a file that just contains null followed by a bunch of spaces, then then it's still not working, but is it the same issue? I'm not sure. So we get to 1, 2, and we're consuming characters, but we never actually get to this point. So we get to a point where, okay, so there are still characters left there, but okay, so I need to put in a break there. So instead, let's see. So checking null still, so I'm obviously not consuming enough characters, but again, it could be to do with this kind of the way the peakable stream is working, in that I'm getting the start of the current character as the index rather than the next character. So that's just some problem with the abstraction that I'm currently building. So let's see, can I address that? So just to double check the kind of invariance about all of these. So peak is more or less working as we would expect in the case of next character. It returns, it probably doesn't need to return anything at the moment. I don't think I'm actually consuming the next character for any of these. In fact, I'll rename that just because that could be a little confusing. Yeah, so I'm not actually using the value here, so that could be throwing me off somewhat. So for the moment, I'm going to say that this doesn't return anything. And instead, it's just going to set an index. And what it's going to do is, and these aren't being used either. Oh no, just the index is being used. So in this case, it's returning the current character from the stream, but really I want to get the index of the next character in the stream. So probably what I'll have to do is, when I start parsing, I should probably refactor I'll probably have to rename some of these things, but let's see. Yeah, the names here are quite hairy, so yeah, so peakable characters for the most part. I'm actually not interested in the character itself. In general, I'm really interested in the index. Maybe I can wrap that somewhat to make it a bit clearer. So maybe next index instead. Maybe I don't even need next index. Maybe I can just do peekable characters next and just start it off an index later. And that means that when I perform next character, it'll actually start off at the correct character. And in terms of peak character as well, that could be simplified to use the underlying string too, maybe. But let's see, 26. Yeah, we'll make that mutable. So still checking null. Let's see. So so we'll print out the start position here, and we'll print out the end as well. So what's happening here? So first of all, we peek at what the next character is. Now that should really, we haven't actually moved on, or shouldn't have moved on by this point. Oh, it's because I'm using this kind of separate mechanism. Yeah, characters in this case is really just being used to track the index of the underlying string. So that's kind of interfering with the functionality here. So what I should be doing in this case, realistically, is two things. First of all, I need to check if self index is less than let's see, self. Oh, you got ahead of me, unavailable user 5 before I ask you how you were doing. You say you're fine. Well, I'm fine too. Thanks very much for asking. Glad to see you again. So, yeah, first of all, I need to make sure that the index is actually in range, and naturally enough, yeah, very much so it seems. So either that or have a great deal of precognition, faster than C++ in compilers, in the sense that you can actually compile the results in the past. So yeah, are there faster than light? Yeah, I have heard of faster than light C++ compilers actually, because they can optimize out loops. But yeah, that just means that they can compute results faster than light, but they can't unfortunately compute results in the past, which seems to be more like what your comment was. So yeah, definitely faster in that regard. So so if the index we'll say is greater than or equal to that, then we'll return null or none. Otherwise, we can do a look into raw characters, but as noted before, now this is actually potentially going to return a string, so is the only thing, will it? So it'll be slice index. That's an interesting one. This is tricky stuff. I haven't actually dealt with string kind of manipulation in Rust before, and I suppose it's a little more advanced than what I'm used to. So what I'm probably going to want to do is index into raw characters with the index. So yeah, realistically, I'm going to have to maintain the index that I'm currently on, as well as the next index. So again, I'll rename all of these in time, but again, just want to get things working first. So first of all, so I'll skip the first character in peekable characters. That means that the next character, or let's see, if let some index paired with the character, or paired with the skipped character. So I'll peek at the next character, and if there is one, then I'll set the next index to it. And that means that down here, the logic will actually change to say if the current index is equal to the next index, which basically means that we're at the end of the stream. Or I could do it such that so when I jump onto the next character, then the current index I have will be set to next index, and then the next index will be set to I, and that'll happen in both cases. But then I suppose I can make next index optional. And so that means if there is no next index, then can I do that? I assume partial equality is defined over, but maybe not that specific option type with that concrete type. But let's try that. So if the next index is none, then we're that. In fact, no, I wouldn't want to do it that way anyway, because I need to be able to get the value of the next index. So we would go self-index up onto end. Otherwise, we get none here. So let's try that. Are we getting a lot of compiled errors with that? We are. So let's see, line 65. Well, yeah, so this is incomplete at the moment. So next index in this case would be none, and in this case will be some I. So line 63. So yeah, that's a good point. I'll need to init some and this is definitely a lot trickier than I was expecting, as is so often the case with this parsing in Rust. So yeah, and if we're at the end of the stream, then next car is a no op. I could panic or something, but what I'll probably do is in future add some kind of a boolean or something to flag whether the next character actually went forward or not. So let's try that. 54, yes. So that's that was somewhat of a worry that I'm no longer returning a character anymore, but instead returning a string. And then what's that on line 32? That's just, I need to wrap that in a sum. So maybe I can actually rely on the fact that I am consuming. So maybe I'll actually create this kind of span type, similar to what LALRPOP is expecting. I'll just call it cur for the moment. I'll say I assume that's all right. I probably won't need all of that, but I'll do it like this for the moment, and then remove what I don't need later. So let's see. So basically, what I'm going to do instead is, yeah, this is getting quite complicated now at this stage, and I haven't even gotten into the interest. Well, I would say interesting bit of actually, checking what the characters are. It's even just getting the characters and indexes in order so that they're easy to navigate. So let's see. First of all, we're going to do character next to see what characters we're even dealing with, and if that's none, let's see. So that'll be a pairing of an index and a character. And I'll store that as current. Oh, hi, Safari Miner. Welcome to the channel, and thanks for chatting in. So, I'm checking so I'll want to store the index and the character. I'm doing well. Thanks very much for asking. How are you? So let's see. So I'll say let that be the current, and if there's something there, then we'll store it. Otherwise we know we're at the end of the stream. And then if maybe that'll be enough for the moment, actually. So I'll say that. Yeah, I was half thinking this earlier, but thought it would be too complicated. But considering the things that I thought would be simpler would be turned out to be too complicated. Maybe maybe this will actually be more appropriate. So let's try it this way. I'll just add it into the body of the Lexer to see does it what kind of type errors I get. So line 36. Doing pretty good. Currently writing 3 different engines for 3 different games at the same time. Wow, that's quite an undertaking. And are they kind of 2D games, 3D games, or sounds like it's a mix? And are those written in Rust as well? 37. So expected that kind of a character, but actually got a full-fledged character. Writing code in C and C++. That's yeah, a very big undertaking. It's been a while since I've looked at those. Definitely, I wonder, do I still have the headspace to track everything that's going on in those kind of code bases? Well, different set of challenges, but that's very cool. So let's see. Peak character then. So now that I have the current character and the current index, let's see, peak character in this case will now just return the character inside of current. So if I do if let let's see, I probably won't be able to return a reference anymore, actually, will I? So if I do sum IC is equal to self current, and I return none there, I can return some C, but I don't think I can take the reference of that because of the lifetimes. So one's 2D and 3D. Okay, PC and Wii U, that's very cool. And the other ones are 2D and PC only. Very nice. And haven't fully ported a ray tracing library to Wii U yet. That's very interesting. Are the so is that kind of an official SDK that you're using for the Wii U, or is it kind of an open source homebrew kind of SDK for working on the Wii U? Because I remember, again, this ages back, just looking into homebrew Game Boy stuff. But I suppose for with Nintendo these days, actually, it's probably they're probably a lot more open with there's a lower barrier to entry to getting hold of the SDKs, aren't there? Anyway, sorry. Yeah, I suppose that's the question. Is it kind of official SDKs, or are they more kind of homebrew open source SDKs at the moment? Cannot return value referencing local variable C. Yeah, that's what I would have imagined. So maybe, again, just for the moment, it's not the most efficient, but I'll just copy the character. And then on 96, that means I need to change that from a reference to an actual character. Okay, so open source SDK for homebrew and releases. Oh, that's very cool. Nice. And cool. I'm always amazed at how people can actually develop those kind of homebrew SDKs like that. That's very very impressive to me, and the kind of reverse engineering that must go into it is, yeah, mind blowing, I think. So Now, having said that, I'm after quoting myself into an infinite loop here. So what's going on? So peak character returns the current character that I have. So now I need to implement next character so that it actually goes on to the next one. So let's see. First of all, I want to see if I perform self-cars next, that if it has something in it, then that'll override the current index. And that also, that contains the current index as well. It doesn't increment the current index currently though, so what I'll do is and at this point I want the index to be before the character that, before the current character, which is after the character I've just consumed, shall we say. So in this case, I think index needs to be I in this scenario. And so that needs to be an if let. Oh, having to write physics engine, that's well, I don't know how you find time to work through all of that's a whole other level altogether. So found a tuple. So do it like that. Okay, and so it looks like that's actually worked finally. So again, fudging around with the indexing and where we are, and being able to grab ranges of the underlying stream. Got there in the end. So I can actually remove that now. Index will still be so how to make this then more legible somewhat, because in this case we have some duplicated data here, because index is now just referring to the character I stored in cur. So that's a bit redundant. I suppose you have plenty of time. I suppose that's true. I suppose in general, okay, that's a pretty bad joke, but New York Times, Sunday Times, but no, that's cool. But I do find it tough sometimes with so many projects on the go. Again, this even for me is kind of a side project, so to speak, that I have along with other projects, but finding time to develop all of them is just it's just with daily life and everything, it's difficult to sneak in a bit of coding here and there. So hats off to anyone who can dedicate kind of that much time to it. I certainly envy that. But let's see. So that's at least working now. Not too happy with the fact that there is a bit of that. There is that redundancy between the index and the current character, and I think the terminology around them could definitely be cleaned up a good bit. Oh, I think I've ended up with another infinite loop, though, is the only trouble. So let's see, I'll put some more debugging in place there. So if I type this, so what's happening here that it's not actually terminating. So I'm doing a check down there, which means I am getting to the return statement, I presume. Oh, and am I getting excuse me, an infinite loop in the skip whitespace yet again, because now I've updated the functionality. So let's see. So I'll say A, B, and C. So let's try that. And if I stop that now, so it's just constantly going between B and D. So it's performing next character, and then it's doing peak character. Oh, and because I'm not actually changing anything if I reach the end of the stream, I need to actually now this is one thing as well. So index doesn't really reflect the fact that the end of the stream has been reached. Yeah, that's something to consider as well. But let's see, how are we there? Okay, so that's so gotten rid of the infinite loop again, and that's finally returning. So that's now at least recognizing ASCII or alphanumeric identifiers. So where is that print line coming from? So in that case, okay, so it's finally gotten to the point where I'm returning a proper match for null. If I have NUL there, for example, then it'll say that that's unsupported. If I add an extra L in there, it'll read too much and say that that's unsupported. I presume that's what's happening. I need to again enhance the output. But if I say end the file just after the L, that's resulting in yeah, a lot of off by one errors and boundary issues here. So if I add a space in there, it probably parses it all right. But then if I remove that space at the end, then it doesn't recognize it. So what's the issue there? So if I go print line again, and I say, I assume this will just print out the null with 3 characters. Yeah, NUL. Because what's happening in this case is it's so this is saying what's the current character I'm on. It's N. Let's see. So it's saying the current character I'm on is N, could be to do with this, yes, this end index now. So because I've reached the end of the stream, I haven't actually moved the index on at all. So I would have to say index is equal to, let's see, self raw characters len -1 for the moment, just to address this boundary condition. Not the nicest, but hopefully is functional. Still not though. Let's see. So start and end. The game I'm currently working on is called A Really Small Guy because the character is 10 pixels by 10 pixels. Well, that would be very difficult to see on a high resolution monitor, I'd say. So so this would have to be 0 and 4, I think, in order to actually capture all of the characters. Okay, so in this case, actually, it would have to be, this is a tricky one because I'm probably combining inclusive and exclusive position indexing positions without separating the two ideas properly. Yeah, I'll have to do some further revisions on this in future, but at least it does seem to be working now, and I can at least move forward with the scanner and hopefully start putting more sample code in place and then start cleaning it up a bit later. So what I might do next, so I do have a parsing null. Let's see if I take a look at the parser again. So it's now parsing null if what are some of the next bits I want to do? So I want to start matching comments probably soon enough, matching strings and all the different primitives. I also want to start matching or handling the location properly so that it's actually a line and column position, but that can be handled separately. Anyway, that shouldn't be too much trouble to introduce. Next thing I probably will do is, maybe handling for comments, because that is something that was missing from this language for a long time, and it is something that I'm keen to introduce. And the idea here is quite simple. I would say that if we are at the start of a token, and the next character in the sequence is a hash symbol, then we basically just consume tokens until we reach a new line character. So let's see. Actually, before I move on to that, I can probably demonstrate the fact that a program in this language can consist of any number of nulls. So those are probably all valid. That's invalid if I combine them. Yeah, but having any number of nulls at the moment is valid. So now that that's in place, I can introduce logic to skip characters until the end of the line. So let's see. In this case, I could probably do I could actually do a construct with the return value of next character. because I'll always be consuming it. But for now, I think it's all right. So what I'll do is if C is equal to a new line character, then I'll break. Otherwise, I'll continue on to the next character. And that should be more or less it to be able to handle single line comments. So let's see, line 106. Okay, so I'll actually have to probably handle this with part of the skip whitespace functionality. So this will have to skip whitespace and comments. So let's see. So if the next character isn't a whitespace character, then return. Otherwise, so what we can do here is do an if statement, and if the character is a hash symbol, then I'll do another loop in here to skip until the end of the line. And so if C is equal to a new line, then it breaks out of this and continues skipping whitespace. Do I need to nest those? I do need to do them in a loop, but this kind of implies that one has precedence over the other. Though it doesn't really, I don't think. So maybe we'll try that. Skip whitespace and comments. Cool, so that's at least compiling. If I add those, some new lines, still compiling, and then I can, here are some comments, and that's still compiling, so those are being skipped. Now I'm not sure if those nulls are being handled or not. One thing I need to update though is the vim syntax file I have for Laravel, because comments will now be terminated by the end of the line. So let's see. Vim syntax region. Or what was the? I think I was using a syntax definition for, or I was working off a vim syntax file for Rust. So let me just double check that. Syntax Rust, and if I look for comment here, and so start end, and so end in that case is just dollar symbol. So that should simplify things. And so if I do dollar symbol there, and if I highlight this again, yeah, so single like comments are now highlighted correctly as well. Me trying to find in which continent I am with an API that says in which continent the Canada is. that looks pretty frustrated, all right. So let's see. So that seems to be comments more or less supported. What are the other bits? In fact, I'll create a little to-do list, and I won't be staying on too much longer. But let's see. So I'll need support for strings, quoted and unquoted. In fact, do I have a section on the scanner below as well? I do. So, so the scanner will need support for, let's see, strings, integers, identifiers. Those are kind of the main ones. And whitespace, which is skipped. And identifiers will be reused for tokens as well. So for the most part, let me think, there might not be actually too much left. Now that I have the basics covered, hopefully there might not be too much left to handle the rest in theory. So yeah, let's give it a shot. So I'll start off with this. So we'll say, well, there's a couple of things to consider actually. I haven't looked into how to handle tokens that actually pass data, such as identifiers. So in this case, actually, what I can say is if the token is not null or not some keyword, basically, then it's kind of a regular identifier that, you know, a variable name or something like that. So let me take a look at how that would be represented in LALRPOP. So, for example, we have a numerical symbol. In the Lexer, we would just put the symbol in there in the enum value, and then how do we get it out of that on the other side? So we have num maps to a number symbol token, and I guess, okay, so yeah, I think I get it. So what I would essentially do in that case is something like, so I'd have identifier here. I'd mark it as ID. It would probably need to be a reference there as well. I'll probably have to muddle around with the types a bit. But let's see, let's try that first. Yeah, so I'll go just to string for the moment, and I'll replace that with proper lifetimes in a short minute. So then over here, what I can do is I can say up here when I match an identifier terminal, then that is handled as ident, and so is this some kind of special syntax actually, and actually in this case? So what does this reference? Opcode. Does it reference a separate type that's been defined, maybe? Oh, yeah, so these are all separate types. So in this case, I could probably put in ident string, and that means, so if I find an identifier somewhere here and say that matching that gives me a statement, and this would have to be ident instead. And that all seems to compile. So then if I go to my test script, I just type in ABC, that's now a valid token. Okay, kind of worried about what will result from that eventually, but in theory that seems to be working. How best to test that though at this point in time? Maybe if I go into main, because I can't evaluate it right now because there's no, it's not, they're not valid structures, although I can probably start putting pieces together to allow full statements to be defined. So maybe I'll start doing that. So let's see. So first of all, I'll add in some handling for, I'll call it a statement terminator, or I'll just call it a semicolon. Let's simplify things for the moment. So in this case, I will want to do to push the cursor forward, and I will want to, let's see, return adding a semicolon there. And so that means hopefully that I'll be able to start adding support for proper statements. So like that, and then if I go down here, I'll uncomment this, but leave most of it still commented, only uncommented term apart. So the things I want to enable again are In fact, I might as well uncomment all of the things that I want. So it'll basically be function calls and what else? Function calls and identifiers, maybe maybe variable assignment, we'll see. Or maybe string literals actually would be something to handle before identifiers, but yeah. So basically I want to be able to print out, and actually that'll be a good, sorry, kind of rambling to myself at the moment and thinking about how best to kind of represent and debug this stuff. But I think I'm figuring it out anyway, hopefully. So I'll need support for semicolons and commas. Oh, and parens. So there'll be a lot of similar stuff here. So what I'll do is this won't be the kind of most efficient code or the cleanest, but there's again more to capture an idea. I'll be refactoring it shortly enough. At least that will be the intention. What I would generally do for these kind of constructs, and I probably still will, is to put them in a map and do a lookup. Now, the only issue with that is this being a kind of a hotspot, again, part of the loop, that could introduce a fair bit of fair bit of additional overhead in terms of function calls, hashing, and lookups, whereas this kind of match might be a bit more straightforward. I'm not sure, but again, that's something to optimize later. Okay, so that's compiling again at least. I wonder if there's actually enough there. Now, the only thing is, where are names defined? I'm surprised that, oh yeah, so I haven't actually re-enabled those yet either. Yeah, so instead of ident like that, it'll now be ident like that. Now, I'm not sure how I particularly feel about that. I wonder, is there a better way of handling it? Can I do a ident like that? No. Well, I'll leave it like that for the time being, and there's probably some obvious way of resolving it that I'm not thinking of, but for the moment, I think I'm able to do expressions again, and hopefully function calls, which will be very cool. So let's go ahead and try that. Now that's one thing, is that I would have expected this to fail because now that I've added semicolons back in, it should require semicolons between each of those statements, and this would nearly have resulted in an identifier error as well. I wonder, am I getting the same? Oh, hey Togglebit, welcome back, and thanks for all the comments, everyone. Oh, thank you. Take care. So with that all said, what I'm expecting at this point is that this reference would return an error. Maybe I'm actually getting the same comment skipping behavior as before, because I'm attempting to match new line. Maybe that's the issue. If I put ABC up here, let's try that. Unrecognized EOF at location 3. And what was it expecting instead? Yes, so it was expecting a colon. So I seem to have reintroduced somehow this single line comment behavior, which comments out the rest of the file. So maybe in my skip whitespace and comment file, I'll have to do some more improvements here at some point, but maybe replacing N with R for carriage return would work. No. Let me see, because I'm guessing that this is consuming the rest of the stream. So let's try printing out the characters that I'm coming across. Yeah, thanks for the question, Clippy. So yeah, the design goals of this language is intended to be, and thanks for the comment. The intention of this language is to essentially be a not replacement, but it's sharing the same domain as shell scripts and bash essentially. So maybe I can pull up a sample that I've done recently enough. So let me just set syntax is equal to Laurel. So the idea is that so Bash is quite nice at what it does. It has some very good ergonomics, but there are still, quite a lot of rough edges in terms of legacy and things like that. So, if statements, they work and they're functional. I personally, when I was learning it, had to look it up reference wise so many times. So first of all, one alternative I was thinking of doing is just making a bash alternative that's a little, more C-like, or kind of has that kind of C style that we're used to from so many modern languages. Also the behavior around strings, like automatic splitting on whitespace, things like that, make make these kind of things a little trickier. Um, the idea really is to take the nice low overhead things of Bash and start putting a more, I suppose, yeah, modern look and feel over more of the rough edges. So what are some examples of what this language can do instead, or alternatively to Bash? Now, the thing I was realizing as I was so I have the language more or less, or a lot of the language developed at this point, and I was in the process of converting some existing scripts. This is such as the Docker retrieval script, and what I noticed as I was developing this is that the language that I'm developing, similar to Shell, is I suppose thanks for the comment, Noon sorry, I'm a bit out of it today, but similar space as fish, and a lot of there are a lot of languages at the moment kind of trying to address this problem. I think Elfish and Oil, and one I discovered yesterday, because it was on Reddit, was I actually can't remember the name of it now, maybe GCS or something. And there are a lot of languages kind of vying to solve this problem. Again, this is just my attempt, based on my own thoughts about, you know, how best to solve this problem of having a lightweight domain specific language that can be used for, handling, making function or making program calls, parsing output easily, piping it to other programs, things like that. All this kind of glue code, but add in a bit more, I suppose, structure to make it more familiar to, based on a lot of modern languages, and kind of integrate some of the niceties that we've kind of gotten used to, such as, more regular handling around hash maps, objects, lists, things like that. And the one thing I was, like I was saying, the one thing I was noticing as I was refactoring this particular script is that a lot of the script actually consists of basically non-program calls. Python would be the typical one. But again, the difficulty with Python that I find is that for the actual process calls and the process manipulation, you have to use libraries such as popen for low level stuff. You do have, say, the likes of, things similar to what are in Go, like Go exec. So to run a once off program such as, ls, and then parse the output is quite straightforward. But when you get into the realms of, wanting to get the, get the output, send it to another program, maybe change the behavior based on the result, do this kind of high level communication between processes, that's where the likes of Python and Go or any of those kind of scripting languages tend to be a little, it's not that it's difficult to do those things, but they start putting roadblocks a bit more, or they're not, I suppose that's where Bash kind of shines, is that it is this DSL for writing, for handling processes, but then Bash doesn't have that structure that we're so used to from other languages, and that's kind of what this language aims to do, is to attempt to add that, keep the niceties of Bash, but add more structure, basically. This is one example of, say, the current syntax for say running a program, or running a process and storing the output. So it's possibly a little strange because I'm making it a little more explicit and a little bit more verbose than it has to be. But some things that you might notice, say, compared to the likes of, say, writing it in Go or Python. So if I was doing this in Python, to do this kind of an SHC and then call this stuff, it would be something more like p open, I pass in sh, and sh itself is a string, and c is a string, and then I pass in these parameters. It's not much, it probably, it's not too much of a difference, but the idea is that, the more and more processes that you are calling, the more of an overhead this becomes. Now, this shell file, as I developed it, I realized there aren't actually too many process calls. The Docker retrieval script probably was actually written in shell more due to the fact that it could be run in many different environments, rather than the fact that it's a script that's calling lots of different processes. So it's probably not showing off the benefits of Laurel probably as much as it could, but that's at least the first script that I've started looking at, but I'll be looking at others in the future. But if I look at one common example that I like to give, and one possibility if I decide to adapt the syntax, would be looking at the likes of programs that have lots of subcommand specifiers. So an example of this would be git, remote, and you might have ls, and it would be possible to have kind of a lightweight syntax that does it like this. So again, if I was doing that in Python, it would be something like git here, remote, ls, and so on. And then you have, say, further processing there. The idea with this is that there will be hopefully some more sane defaults as well, such as capturing output by default, but you can add extra parameters to change that. You could it'll also terminate by default, so it'll be error exit by default as well, which hopefully will make the write behavior simpler, and you can override those errors if you want easily enough. So you might say that by default, if this fails, then it should terminate the program because it should always succeed, and we're not handling the case where it fails. But it could be an easy thing like that to then say output exit code is equal to 1 to be able to handle that case, for example. I'm probably not doing a great job of explaining it today, but that's kind of a rough introduction. I probably have a few YouTube videos online at this point that explain it a bit more clearer. I do need to put up a blog post as well at some point to have as an easy reference, but hopefully the gist of it is kind of clear. But anyway, sorry, I missed a comment on the new shell implementation as an interesting go at external calls. I not is new shell. New shell is the Windows shell, is it? I can't actually remember, but I could be confusing things. That's very likely. If it's not the Windows one, then I'm not. I don't think I'm familiar with it actually. But thanks very much for the comments, everyone. So but anyway, to continue on, I might just take a look at debugging this comment scanning, because this is something that has was in the default scanner, and was one of the reasons why I was so interested in creating a custom scanner for a long time, because the default scanner wasn't working the way I was wanting it. So so yeah, looking at this loop where I'm performing peak chart. Okay, that is, yeah. Again, I've no one to blame but myself for that, because I have such bad variable names at that point, and I can probably replace the character return at that point with the new line character, and that seems to be okay. So that's still continuing on. So I wonder how I can retrieve the new line character from the stream. I'll have to take a look at. Oh, sorry. So new shell is a shell written in Rust. Okay, very interesting. That's actually not something that I've come across recently. But I must take a look, because I am interested in just the approaches that other people are taking to these. Thanks for the comment, Diablo D3. Because there are so many approaches, I am very interested in, for example, the approach that the author of Oil is taking. It seems very thorough and very expansive. I mean, the scope of the project that he's undertaking is somewhat mind blowing to me. But at the same time, a lot of the approaches that I do see, and they're very valid, but I suppose they try to keep POSIX compliance, or keep a lot of the syntax from Bash. And while the Bash syntax, for the basic stuff, I think is very ergonomic. It's about as ergonomic as you can get for for a language to run commands. There are no parentheses required. There's no quotes required, and all these kind of things. It's very lightweight, but at the same time, those ergonomics do constrain the design of the language somewhat, and make adding structure to it a little bit tricky, I feel. And that's kind of one of the reasons why I've opted for this kind of approach that breaks POSIX compliance. But it's still really interesting to see what approaches other people take to it. And the oil shell, like I say, is, I mean, the breadth of that project is just, on another level. XYZ PFUI Baba. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm not understanding that at all. The PFUI Baba is going over my head a little, sorry. But yeah, thanks very much for the recommendations. I must check out the Rust shell as well. Means ugly. So is that with regards to if check do? Still not following. Sorry, I get so I'm understanding that the code that you're pointing to is ugly code, but I'm not quite following the sequence there. Oh, it looks like my battery is running low. Sorry, just a sec while I plug in. There we go, and there we go. So it would have BusyBox, but with fish shell. And I would like to have BusyBox with fish shell and Rust. Yeah, I hear a lot of good things about fish shell. Again, it's one of those interesting things as well. And continuing on from the discussion of new shell above, I do wonder if it's. I do sometimes get confused when people talk about um, when they're introducing a new shell, because a lot of people do introduce new shells with a complementary shell language built in as well, which I always feel is an interesting choice, because I don't think, like, I personally don't see a huge benefit of having the full shell language embedded into the shell itself. I find that when I'm writing at the shell, like it's useful from the point of view of it's, natively a REPL or a REPL, so it's useful for testing out code. But in terms of having that flexibility of being able to write for loops and if statements and things from the command line directly, I feel that there are very few constructs that are simple enough to actually utilize that. 9 times out of 10, if I'm going to get that complex on the command line, I'm going to put it into a script file anyway. So I do find it interesting sometimes that um, that shell languages are bundled with shells. And I think this is something that the author of the oil shell and maybe some others kind of identified, that, they've tried to split those apart and say, okay, well, I'm tackling the language aspect in this project, and I'm tackling the idea of writing a cooler shell in this other project. But it's funny how many projects then do bundle the two. So that's an interesting aspect, and I'd be interested to see how New Shell handles that too. So oh, thanks very much. Yeah, and the interesting thing about the DSL as well is, as I write this, I do see, you know, I have kind of written it with the idea of, I suppose I've thought about this a lot and thought of all the different ways it could be integrated. Um, and whether it makes even sense as a standalone language, because there's so many kind of other languages that already have libraries, already have all these things. you know if I write this, you know uh, language for a specific niche, it's nice that it improves that niche, but it means that there's so much existing code that can't be reused as a result. And what I think could be a possibility at some point as well is even just focusing on the part that just makes the ergonomics of calling functions easier. So if I again go back to this piece, that this could be made into its own kind of macro as well. That I was thinking that there could be this special dollar syntax that until the end of line introduces a macro expansion, and until the end of the line this is kind of using this special DSL, and still it expands to whatever the local language is. So if you're writing it in Rust or you're writing it in Go, the macro expands to Rust code or Go code. So for example, if I was using Go, it would expand to something like, osexec run sh, or something like cmd sh, and followed by cmd args c, something like that, and it would build, it would, excuse me, perform code generation to generate the equivalent code. But then this would actually just be a macro language rather than a full-fledged independent programming language. I think it would make, as much as I like the idea of writing a programming language, I think the actual innovative part of this language would be usable as just a little piece that kind of can get macro expanded in another language. Yeah, exactly. I think pattern matching for scripts actually makes a lot of sense as well, and even just like, yeah, I will say I do find Rust to be somewhat, at a glance it can be a little noisy, but at the same time, I think especially compared to when I started looking at it a couple of years ago, like it's just always kind of just been making things simpler and simpler the whole time. So especially for doing error handling right, I think Rust really does a great job of that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's something that yeah, it, I'll just have to see where the project goes. Really, I've all these ideas. Um, so how do I do a cast actually? So Rust cast char to int, but so I don't want char to digit. I want the order ordinal. Um, yeah, so as u32, but yeah, there's a lot more to explore with this language. Like these are just kind of ideas that I'm coming up with in terms of like using it as a macro in a different language. First, I just want to flesh out the existing language, and while I might not use all of it, I'm just interested to see where it goes anyway. But it's really nice to be able to talk about this with people and get feedback from people and kind of information about what else is out there as well, because the more I research, the more ideas that I'm able to gather from different people who have kind of trodden this path as well. um, if you come from Lisp, Rust looks noisy. That's very true, I suppose, especially because of all the symbols. I suppose suppose one thing about Lisp as well, though, is the trailing parentheses. So there is an element of noise to Lisp, but very different kind of noise and very different. Yeah, I would say, yeah. Um, I suppose Lisp is quite like Bash in the sense of it's very consistent. It's like even the if statements and branches and things like that are, they're all I suppose. But then I've only kind of experienced with the probably old school Lisps like Common Lisp and Scheme and things like that. I'm not, I haven't been keeping up with the likes of Clojure and things like that. So I could be sounding very out of touch here. So so let's see, unterminated delimiter. So there we go. So what I'm looking for is character 10, as I would have expected. So I'm looking for. So it starts off with a hash symbol, continues on, and here are some comments. Oh, interesting. Is the I assume that the character indices. No, it can't be swallowing white space because it has spaces there. But why? Oh, because it actually is breaking there. So it's breaking there. Um, hmm. Oh, that's quite nice, actually. A a font or even a plugin to just collapse multiple parentheses. That's that's a neat idea. But this is an interesting one now. So here are some comments. I would expect a new line next, but it's going in fact 2 new lines. Maybe try putting something else here. Let's try that. So it's not finding a break anywhere. Where are those new lines going? So this is the only place where cars next is being called, I think, other than the start. So if I print, this is going a bit overboard, but if I do a print line here, and I say C as U32, somewhere it should output 10. And in fact, maybe I'll pair it with the character itself just to be able to read it more easily, the characters that are being output. Yeah, so here are some comments. Yeah, and the first, that's funny. So the first one is being skipped. Oh no, so it's, yeah, so that character stream seems to be skipping new lines, if I'm understanding correctly, which is very surprising to me. Oh dear. Oh my goodness. Yeah, and this is probably the reason why it never worked in the default scanner either, is because in main, when I read the full file, I'm reading it in lines and then not adding the new lines back in. That is, that's bad now. That's been an issue there for a long time. For a long time, and that is and to think that it was something as trivial as that. Yeah, that's bad. Oh man, I'm glad to have found it anyway, but oh, that's embarrassing. But anyway, finally getting that that unsupported call after ABC, and if I remove that, oh no, why is that coming up as unsupported? Maybe if I do ABC semicolon. No, it should if I do ABC up here. Okay, so it still outputs unsupported. Not fully sure what's causing that, but hopefully I'm able to move on anyway. So let's see. I won't stay on too much longer, but I would like to get the print function working again, and that would pave the way that would just make things a lot easier from this point on, and hopefully make the that would be a good start for finishing off the scanner, I would say. So let's see where we are. So I have ABC. It's saying it's panicking with unsupported at the moment. Which is a Lexing error. Not quite sure which unsupported call that is. So what I might do is, if I go, into the Lexer, and I'll say that unsupported will take a string, and let's see. So let's see. We'll put no match here. Oh, that's the only time when it gets returned actually at the moment, so I don't need to figure out where it's getting called. So the issue is that it's not matching any of these tokens, and it's not matching that. Maybe I can output the index actually. So index 30. And it'd be nice to finally take advantage of the fact that so what is the character that is happening there? Oops. Okay, so it's a new line character. Why isn't that getting skipped by skip whitespace and comments? Is not getting matched by is ASCII whitespace now? That's a pity. I think I'm even just kind of confusing myself or going too far down a rabbit hole at this stage. What I'm probably going to do is I think I got a fair bit done today, probably not as much as I would have liked, but I think it's, you know, probably on the cusp of kind of resolving a lot of these issues, but it's probably at the point where if I dig any deeper, I'll probably kind of get into a rabbit hole that I just can't get out of at this point in time. So I'm probably going to leave that stream there for today. Thanks very much for everyone who wrote in. Thanks for all the comments. It's been a real pleasure speaking with everyone and hearing about different developments even that are happening in the Rust community and discussions about this project. Really appreciate it. So yeah, if you're interested, I do stream these kind of semi-regularly on the weekends. So you know, feel free to subscribe if you're interested in checking it out again next weekend. So thanks very much, everyone, and enjoy the rest of the weekend, and talk to you all later. Bye-bye.